Hey, and welcome to... Excuse me. Let's start that again. Hey, and welcome to the Love Monday podcast, episode 3. I'm glad you could join me. I hope you'll subscribe to this podcast because it's going to help me out, and I think it's going to help the world out. I'm trying to start a movement here to get people to love Monday just like Friday, but for a different reason, and I think everyone should, and I think everyone can. So it's going to depend on people listening to this podcast, sharing information about it. Some of these podcasts are going to have to do with individuals, like it's going to help you love Monday just like Friday, but for a different reason. And others are going to help managers help their teams love Monday just like Friday. And some will be kind of a combination of both. And today, that's the last one is one of these, where this is a manager could listen to this and get a lot of suggestions and ideas to how to help their team love Monday. And an individual contributor could look at it and say, so just like you could look at this and say, or listen to it and say, okay, these are things I can do, and these are things I need to kind of take control of. But the topic today are 12 things your boss has to provide for you to be able to love Monday. Now, I'm a little apprehensive with that title because a lot of people are going to say, hey, you're making it so the power is in the hands of the manager, and you're leaving individuals powerless. If they have to wait for their manager to provide these things, then things are going to go poorly. Well, that's true, and that is true. But the point is, scientifically, we know that if you're working in a situation where your manager isn't providing these things or helping you get these things, these 12 items, then you're not going to love Monday. You're just not. You're not going to be able to be engaged in your job, and that's really what loving Monday just like Friday is all about. If you love what you do, if you're engaged in what you do, you don't dread Monday. You actually look forward to it. And as you've heard me talk about with the 4 mistakes that make people hate Monday, the 4th one is having a bad boss and keeping them. And this one's going to go hand in hand with that, but what we're talking about today, I'm not trying to leave you powerless. I'm trying to help you understand that you do have power, but if you're in a situation like this, you need to do something different. You can't wait for it to change, because if your boss isn't providing these things, there are conversations you can have with your boss or your manager to maybe help this get better. But if they're not providing these things, there's not a high probability that they ever are going to. And so I want to use this podcast, this episode, to call your attention to this, to help you understand the plight you might be in with the current boss you've got. And you might need to stop making mistake number 4, having a horrible boss and choosing to keep them, because believe it or not, like it or not, it is your choice whether or not you keep that horrible boss. So, the 12 things your boss has to provide for you to love Monday. Again, I'm not trying to engage in helping you be a victim or taking your power away. You've got all of the power. You always did. You always will. But this is a way to call your attention to a situation you might be in that needs some changing. And again, we'll talk about ways you can change that before we're done today. So, what are those 12 things that your boss needs to provide to you in your organization, but primarily your boss? Your organization might be setting up your boss to help him or her do that. But if they're still not doing it, you got a bad boss problem. And there's nothing that fixes a bad boss if they don't realize they're a bad boss and want to improve. So, let's talk about this stuff a little bit here. I'm going to take a little pause because I'm getting some noise from my ancient radiant heat in this apartment that I live in. Maybe it's going to be quiet. No, it's not going to be quiet. Hold on one second. Okay, it's going to be quiet. All right. We're going to move on here. What are the 12 things, and where did I get them from? They're not my 12 things. I wish I could say they were, but I didn't do the science on this. I'm not old enough to have done the science on this because it's been going on for probably 40 years. And an organization called Gallup, they're the ones who do the Gallup polls and all of all the interesting data that you hear about all the time in the news. This organization did a study on managers and teams and what great managers do and what poor managers don't do, things like that, or what they do. And they came up with these 12 things that are necessary for you to have a really great experience at work. And so we're going to talk about each one of these one by one, give some statistics, maybe a couple of stories here and there from my experience, because this is where my expertise lies, is in employee engagement. I've consulted a lot of teams and companies to help them have employee engagement turnarounds and help their managers change things and their managers get better so that their people actually did start loving Monday, just like Friday, but for a different reason. So let's go into these 12 things. Number one, and I want you to think about this as we go through, kind of rate these as we go along as far as how strongly you agree or disagree. We'll say number one on a 1 to 5 scale, number 1 being you strongly agree, number 5 being you strongly disagree. How do you agree? How do you rate these 12 items, these 12 elements? So number 1 is, I know what's expected of me at work. Think about that. How would you rate that? Do you strongly agree that you know what's expected? Because 40% of people do not know what is expected of them at work. Isn't that crazy? 40% of people don't know what's expected of them. And it's not about having a great job description or your manager handing you your job description and saying, here, that's what's expected of you. Because it doesn't work that way. Whatever is most important on your manager's list is what's expected of you. And is he or she communicating that to you? Now, the best way for that to be communicated is, how are they measuring your success? Are there key performance metrics? What measurements do you have to know how you're doing? And is anybody reporting back to you how you're doing against those measurements? So number 1, if you don't know whether or not you have those measurements, you probably don't. And if you do and nobody's sharing them with you, you might as well not have measurements. And so you need those to know what's expected of you, because the thing that is measured is the thing that matters most. And so check into it. If you're not getting regular feedback on how you're doing, how your performance is, then you need to check into it and ask your manager. And if he or she can't tell you, then you're not being measured, and there's no way you're going to be able to guess week in, week out, day in, day out what's expected of you. So you're in that 40% of people who don't know what's expected. Let's change that. So that's question number 1. Element number 1, I know what's expected of me at work. Number 2, I have the materials and equipment I need to do my job right. This is, believe it or not, the greatest source of job stress, when you don't have the tool you need to do your job right. And if you've ever tried to do any sort of task with a tool that doesn't work, doesn't fit your hand, isn't the right tool for the job, that's really stressful, isn't it? Think about the times when you've had to just tighten a screw on an oven door or something like that and you couldn't find a screwdriver. What did you do? You probably went over to the silverware drawer and got a knife out, a kitchen knife, and turned the screw with that knife. Well, it sort of works, but you can't get it very tight without really messing up the knife. And it's not the right kind of handle. It just doesn't work. If you had a screwdriver, you could do it in less than half the time and much more efficiently and completely. So you got to have the right tools and materials to do your job right. If you don't, it causes stress, and that stress releases cortisol, which is a stress hormone, which is a good thing if you're trying to run from a lion. But that's not usually anybody's job. And so you don't need a lot of cortisol on your job. And so if you're getting it, it's causing other problems for you, like high blood pressure, heart disease, strokes, all sorts of other health issues that are going to shorten your life, shorten your career, make your life miserable. So you need the tools and equipment to do the job right. How strongly do you agree that you have all the tools you need to do your job right? Good question, right? This is one of those things that when I worked for the Home Depot, we actually made this an initiative for employee engagement one year. And one of the things I rolled out for that Home Depot store where I worked was to make sure everybody got trained on all of the different functions in the building. And some of these functions, and specifically some of the technical functions, like cutting carpet, cutting blinds, cutting wire, cutting rope and chain, all of those things, there are different machines in a Home Depot store that allow employees at the Home Depot to help customers with bulk items like those, like carpet and tile and blinds and things like that. So we made it an initiative because so many people couldn't use those. And so a customer would come in and ask someone, can you cut some pipe for me? And they would say, well, no, let me find somebody. And then they got the stress of trying to find somebody who can cut pipe while they're trying to help this customer. We launched an initiative that gave people an incentive to actually learn all of those tasks in the building. And the people who did it by a certain date got to participate in a lunch and a special manager car wash. The managers in the building wash the cars of the employees who got certified on all of those pieces of machinery in the Home Depot store. So that's one of the things we did so that they could, and it improved customer service, but it most importantly improved people's ability to have the tools they need to do their job right, to serve customers. That was the job, serve customers. And if somebody comes in and you don't know how to use the tool that's going to give them the service they need, that's pretty stressful. So that's one of the things we did. And we had phenomenal success that year in driving up employee engagement. And that's just one of the things we did. But we had a real employee engagement turnaround in that store, one that hadn't been seen in over 3 years. And it saved the job of the manager of that store, believe it or not. So you got to have the tools and equipment to do your job right. Number 3, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Do what you do best. Do you feel like your job allows you to do what you do best? Not the task that you're best at for the job, but to do what you do best, like use your talents, the talents you brought to that job before you came to that job. Do you get to do that? Here's how you know whether or not you're doing that. When you think of your daily tasks, all of them, put them all down, list them all out, the things you do every day. And then next to them, put a plus or a minus. The plus for the tasks that leave you feeling energized, like time is passing without notice, like you can't wait to do it again, like you just know how to do those tasks. You're in a state of flow. We call those peak experiences. When you're having those symptoms, when you're doing a job or a task at work, that means you're using your talents. You're in this flow state. You're having a peak experience. On the opposite side, all the minus ones are the ones where you're feeling drained. You're watching the clock. You don't know how to do the process that well, and you have to keep consulting the instructions or asking for help. So the things that give you energy versus the things that drain your energy. How much time do you spend as a proportion of time, a ratio of time, do you spend with the things that give you energy versus the things that drain your energy? I call them energy gainers and energy drainers. If you're doing the majority of your time with energy drainers, you're headed for burnout and you're not using your talents. So you don't get to do what you do best every day. So you can answer that question based on what I just told you. If you feel drained most of the day, if you hate Monday, if you feel like you never have those or rarely have those peak experiences in your job role, then you would have to strongly disagree that you get to do what you do best every day. Now, if you're a manager listening to this, the really cool part about that is if your people get to do what they do best every day, they are on average 7.8% more productive. Now you hear a number like 7.8 and you think, that's not too impressive, Ryan. I don't really care about 7.8%. What does that mean to me? Well, the time value of that, let's just say they had 7.8% more productive time every day. That's 37.44 minutes per day. Over a year, it's about 162 or 163 hours. That's pretty close to an extra productive month of time. What would you do as a manager if you could get an extra month of time out of every person on your team and they would thank you for it because they're happier, because they get to do what they do best every day? When you get your team doing what they do best every day, on average, you're going to get an extra month of productivity out of every person on your team from now through the end of time. If you need me to come coach you on how to do that, you could hire me, and whatever I charge you, you're going to make up in money saved based on the productivity I'm going to hand you on a silver platter. So if you're a manager, you want to be able to do what you do best every day. If you're an employee, if you're working the job and you're an individual contributor, you want to do what you do best every day because your quality of life is going to go up and you're going to love Monday, just like Friday, but for a different reason. So that's number 3. At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Do you strongly agree or disagree with that? Question number 4 is, in the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work. There's a quote I love, and it goes like this. This one, giving recognition or praise is such low-hanging fruit, you can kick it off the tree without lifting your leg. I love that quote, and it's actually by me. It takes a brave man to quote himself, but it's true. I really believe that. If managers aren't giving you praise or recognition at least every few days, at least every 7 days for doing good work, they're not a very good manager. They just aren't. And These are things that you could talk to your manager about if you want to. But we'll talk about how to resolve these things in your current role before we're done. But if managers aren't doing that, and if you're a manager listening to this and you're not doing that, why aren't you? Now, some of the reasons or excuses, I'll call them, that I get from managers are, well, nobody does that to me. I wasn't raised that way. My dad never gave me praise or recognition. Well, I'm sorry that you had a bad dad. I'm kidding. Maybe your dad wasn't bad, but still, he could have done better with the praise and recognition, or your mom or whomever. Anyway, if you're a manager and you're not doing this, it's super simple. And if you're just using the excuse that you're not getting it, that's not a good reason. The other one is, well, I don't know how to make it sincere. I could just put it on my calendar and do it every Tuesday at noon for everyone. Yeah, you could try that. That's not going to be very sincere. But even then, it could be. The key to sincerity and praise and recognition is adding the here's why after. Like, you did X, and it's so important to us, and here's why. When you add the here's why, it's the sincerity, and it's not made up sincerity. It forces you to ask yourself, okay, that's a cool thing they did. Why is that important to me? And when you can tell them why it's important to you, they're going to light up the room, because it's going to be so sincere, and they're going to be feeling like, wow, he or she has never given me that praise or recognition before. This is pretty cool. And you know what happens? They can have a spike in productivity for the rest of that day and probably the next 3 or 4 days after, just based on that one thing you did. And that productivity can go as high as 20%. All of a sudden, they're just working harder to get what they need to get done because somebody noticed, for crying out loud. So, question number 4, in the last 7 days, I've received recognition or praise for doing good work. That's an easy one to either agree or disagree with. In the last week, has anybody given you praise or recognition for doing good work? If not, you'd have to strongly disagree that you're getting that one. All right, moving on. Question number 5. I should stop for a commercial break here. Problem is, I don't have a sponsor. So we'll carry on. You lucked out. One of these days, though, this is going to be, it's going to be full of commercials. But for now, we'll move right on to item number 5. My supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person. Now, managers, I hear when I coach them on this, managers will say, well, I don't want to get too close to my team. I don't want to be buddy-buddy. I don't want to be friends with them, because if I do, someday I might have to have a hard conversation. Like, I might have to put them on a performance improvement plan because they're not cutting it, or I might have to fire them. I can't do that if they're my friend. Yes, you can if you're a good manager. You definitely can do that, and they expect you to. And that's why you need to care about them as a person, because the more you know about them as a person, the more you can help them and keep them from getting in those situations where you have to have those hard conversations. But be assured that if you have to have them, you can do it. And if you need help, if you've already made friends with somebody and you're delaying a hard conversation, contact me. Go to lovemondaylikeFriday.com. Fill out a form, contact me, tell me what the help you need, and I'll reach out to you. You will give me your email address when you fill out the form. Or leave a comment on wherever you're seeing this or hearing this podcast, and I'll respond to you there. So if you're having trouble and you're keeping people at arm's length because you don't want to get too close, because if you do, you can't have a hard conversation, you need to rethink that, and I'll help you get there if you need to. And so if managers are doing that, that's the wrong thing, because you need to find out, when are the kids' soccer games? When are their birthdays? What are their names? What's going on? What's going on with your employee? Are they having, are they going to get married? They have some big event coming up. They're going on vacation. Have them tell you about their vacation. Get to be friends with them. Care about them as a person, because it's important. Because if you don't, they're going to be disengaged. They're going to hate Monday. They're eventually going to leave you as a manager. And if your manager doesn't care about you, if you're on the team and you're not the manager, and they don't care about you as a person, they never ask those questions, maybe you should ask the manager about some of those things and see if he or she will warm up to you and start turning that around and asking you as well. That's one way you can work on it. All right, that's number 5. Number 6, how strongly do you agree or disagree with this one? There is someone at work who encourages my development. According to a study by McKinsey & Company, the number one reason people are leaving their jobs in 2022 is because of lack of career development and advancement. The number one reason. more than having a bad boss, more than compensation, more than having meaningful work. They're leaving because of lack of opportunities and advancement and lack of development. That's a big deal. So if no one cares about your or encourages your development at work, that's a bad sign. Think about that. Do you agree or disagree that somebody's doing that? Or are they just saying, you get the job done, you get this done, you get this done? That's not development. That's just checking off a task list. So, do you agree or disagree that someone at work, hopefully your manager, is encouraging your development? But it doesn't have to be your manager. It could be someone else. And if someone else is doing it, you're probably still feeling a little better about Monday than if you had a job where no one was encouraging your development. Okay. Number 7, we're more than halfway through, or we're heading down the second half here. At work, my opinions seem to count. Does anybody ever ask you your opinions? You're the one on the front line who knows how to do the work and knows all the challenges of the work. Is anybody asking you that? Or are you volunteering those opinions and nobody's doing anything with it? That's a bad sign. If your manager's sort of ignoring you or ignoring your opinions, that's a bad sign. And if you're a manager who is ignoring those opinions or even asking for them and then doing nothing with them, just paying lip service to that, you're going to lose your people. Point blank, that's what's going to happen. I just got to hit you with it. You're going to lose your people. You need to ask for those opinions and then follow up with whatever you did with those opinions. Maybe it's something you can answer in the moment. Maybe it's not. Maybe you have to escalate it or take it to a different department. But once you do, make sure you circle back and say, hey, that thing you gave me, I just want to let you know the kind of the roadmap for that, how we're going to get to that. And if you don't have an answer, if you can't, and this is the same with tools and equipment. If somebody comes to you, you're a manager, they give you an opinion about how something should change or they need a new tool or equipment, and you can't get it right now, at least tell them what the plan is for getting it for them next month or the back half of the year or next year or whenever. People don't expect you to materialize things right away. They just want to know what's going on and that they're being heard. So if you can do that for number 2 and this one, number 7, my opinion counts. And again, it's not, just putting them off. You have to do something with it. You have to have the assertiveness to go up the chain if you need tools and equipment or a budget for it. Or if there's some change that needs to happen and you can't make the decision based on someone's opinion, you have to do the work. And you have to have that assertiveness and force your boss to do the work as well. You have to be that brave, because if you can't be brave enough to take those things to your boss just because you're afraid you're going to get shut down, you're probably not in the right job. Just the bottom line. So get to it. Get to that assertiveness. You just have to. That's part of the job. And if you can't do that, go find another job. Don't be a manager anymore. It's not a shameful thing. It's not for everybody. You know, there's a statistic out there that only 1 in 10 people have the rare combination of 5 talents that we'll talk about in another podcast that can make them a great manager. Only 1 in 10 people can even be a great manager. So it's not a shameful thing. If you're in a management role and you hate it because you got put there and you didn't really want to be, there's nothing wrong with stepping down from that and letting somebody else do it, and you go do what you do best, because it's probably not management if some of these things are kind of sticking you in the side and you're not feeling good about them. If it's causing you stress, some of these things, and you're feeling like, I could never do this for my team, you probably ought to go find a new role, and that's okay. Go do what you do best. We'll talk all about, in another podcast, we'll talk about some cool stuff like your zone of genius and your zone of excellence and your zone of competence. All of those things. It's really cool to help you get to doing what you do best. And sometimes managers aren't great managers and they're not doing what they do best. And so it's okay to move on. All right, I'm getting off the track. Let's go to number 8. The mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important. And again, if you're just joining in the middle here, I don't know how you could. It's a podcast. This isn't live. I do a lot of live stuff. Anyway, what we're talking about are the 12 things your manager has to provide for you to love Monday just like Friday. And if you're not getting these in your organization or on your team, you're never going to love Monday just like Friday. So I'm just calling these out so that you can do something different. So we're to number 8. How strongly do you agree or disagree with this statement? The mission or purpose of my company makes me feel my job is important. Now, this is extremely important for you to feel like what you do matters. This is about meaningful work. Do you know how what you do every day connects to the mission and purpose of the company? If you don't do that, if you don't know that, you need to ask your manager, why do we do this? And these are good discussions to have, because a lot of times we do things out of tradition or because somebody said we needed to. And sometimes people need to ask the question, why are we doing this? And if we don't really need to, could we stop it? Because we could do something more effective if we did something else. So if you don't know why or how what you do connects to the mission and purpose of the company, you need to ask. And if you're a manager, you need to have those discussions in your one-on-ones with your employees. Ask them, do they know how their job relates to the mission and purpose of the company? If not, you both ought to be asking somebody else, do we have to do this anymore? So, good stuff. Number 9, my associates or fellow employees are committed to doing quality work. Do you agree or disagree with that? My associates or fellow employees are committed to doing quality work. Yes, this is about trust, but it's about more than that. Typically, when people disagree with this, if you're a manager, you might get kind of T-boned by this. You might be surprised by this response, because it's often a low score for many managers and many organizations. And when people disagree that their fellow employees are committed to doing quality work, it's often because someone is slacking on the team. Not only are they slacking on the team, but here's the key point. They're slacking and they're getting away with it. So that's a manager problem. You could say the slacking is the problem. If you're the manager, you might want to blame the slacking on the slacker, but they only slack and continue to slack because you're letting them get away with it. So if you would stop it, then then the slacker doesn't slack anymore. So how do you stop it? Well, if you need help with that, again, reach out to me. I'll help you with those conversations. There should be somebody in your organization who's helping you and training you and teaching you how to do that and helping you role play through those. But if not, I'll help you. I've done it for hundreds of people, hundreds of managers, and I'd be happy to help you too. So when people strongly disagree with this or disagree that their fellow employees are committed to quality, it's because they're looking at their fellow employees. That's what the question is here. And they're saying, whoa, no, that guy over there is not committed to doing quality work because he doesn't do any work. He's slacking and he's getting away with it and nobody's doing anything. So that's on you as a manager if you're a manager listening to this. If you're not a manager listening to this, you might want to escalate those situations to make sure the manager knows about it. So that's one way you can resolve that issue. Number 10, I have a best friend at work. I don't tune into LinkedIn. It's like once a week I'm on LinkedIn and I see somebody make a post complaining about how many times when are we going to stop asking them whether I have a best friend at work? We're not in high school. No, we're not in high school, but this question tells you a lot. And one of the things it tells you is there is a strong correlation between people who agree they have a best friend at work and how productive and high performing their team is. On the other side of that same coin, when people disagree they have a best friend at work, they're usually on a low productivity team, a team that's not performing very well. So I don't have causation in there, but we do have correlation. So it tends to work out that way. If you have a best friend at work, your team is probably pretty high functioning, high performing, high productivity. If you don't agree you have a best friend at work, I'll bet your team kind of sucks, honestly. So anyway, something to think about. And if you're a manager, this is good information. Do you know how your team would respond to this question? Would they agree they have a best friend at work? Because if they do, I'll bet you have a pretty good team going on there. And I'll bet a lot of them don't hate Monday already. So, something to consider. That's question 10. I have a best friend at work. Let's go to number 11. We're almost there. We're in the home stretch now. In the last 6 months, someone at work has talked to me about my progress. Have you, if you're a manager, talked to every one of your team? Have you had a semi-annual performance review, a performance conversation, we'll call it? If you're not doing those on a semi-annual basis, then your team cannot agree to this. So this is one of those binary ones there. It's yes or it's no. And if you're an individual contributor on your team, has somebody talked to you about your progress in the last 6 months? Yes or no? That's how it is. And you need to have those conversations, because if you're not communicating with your manager and managers, if you're not communicating with your team about this, about their performance, how are they ever going to know how they're doing? So it goes back to question number one, and I know what's expected of me. Are you measuring what's expected of them? And are you giving them feedback on that? You probably ought to be doing it a lot more than twice a year or in the last 6 months, but if not, you need to be doing it at least every 6 months. And again, this just is about engaging your team, and it's not about even your company might not be checking up on that, but whether or not it's a standard for your company, if you're not doing it, your team is not going to be engaged. So interesting stuff here. Number 12, this is the last one. In the last year, I've had opportunities at work to learn and grow. So if you are a member of a team, would you agree or disagree that you've had opportunities to learn and grow? And if you're a manager, how would your team answer that? And are you giving them opportunities to learn and grow? They need that. Again, I gave you that statistic from the McKinsey study that said in 2022, the top reason for people leaving is lack of career development and advancement. Again, ahead of having a bad boss, if you're a bad boss, ahead of compensation, and ahead of having meaningful work. They want opportunities to learn and grow. So you're going to lose people because it's the top reason. 41% of people who are leaving jobs in 2022 are leaving for this reason. So it's pretty high impact, and it's pretty important that you get on this. All right. So with that, those are the 12 things. So now what do you do? If you went through these 12 and you're saying, yeah, I kind of disagree with most of these or all of them, or some of them I disagree with. Well, what can you do? Well, your first line of defense is always a conversation. When we communicate, we can solve most problems. And when we don't communicate, most problems get worse every day. And so the first thing is to communicate to your manager. Say, you listen to this Love Monday podcast because you want to love Monday just like Friday, but for a different reason. And you don't. And so, boss man, boss girl, boss lady, I want to have this conversation with you because I'm not loving Monday. And the guy who told me about this on the podcast, you might recommend this podcast to them, get them to subscribe. Thank you. There's my commercial. But the person Ryan, who talked to me about this on this podcast said, I'm never going to love Monday if I'm not having these 12 needs met. And I'm not having them met. And here are the ones I'm not having met. Maybe it's all 12. Have that conversation. And then see how your manager responds to that or reacts to it. If they react, this is something, I love this quote. It's a Zig Ziglar thing where he talks about, if you go to the doctor and your doctor says you're reacting to the treatment, that's a bad thing. If you're responding to the treatment, that's a good thing. So is your manager going to react or respond when you say, hey, I want to love Monday and I need your help to do it? That's going to tell you kind of what your next step is. If it gets ignored, if it's met with resistance, you're probably not going to be happy there. So then the next line of defense is, what about a transfer to another team? Is there another manager doing the same work where you could have your same job role with a different manager and see what you can do to move off that team? Or do you have to change departments? You might need to reskill or upskill a little bit to do something different within your company. Or if you look at your company and say, no, this is how everybody feels. Everybody hates Monday because all the managers are bad because the organization has a horrible culture. Then you have a bigger decision to make, but you need to make the decision because this goes back to the thing I talked about at the top. Your manager needs to provide these things, and if he or she is not doing that, until they know and until they get motivated to provide these things, there's not a high probability that they're ever going to. And so that's where your freedom comes in to say, I'm making mistake number 4 that makes people hate Monday. I've got a horrible boss and I've been keeping them, but I'm no longer going to keep them. And you may need to move on. So that's your third line of defense. Move from your manager to a different one, or have the conversation is the first one with your manager. Then move from your manager to a different one within the organization. If that doesn't work, move from your organization to a better one. And then if you are moving to a better organization, how do you know it's a better organization? How do you know that manager is going to be better? Well, if you go to lovemondaylikeFriday.com, I have a blog out there. You can find it in my profile on LinkedIn too. If you go look at my LinkedIn articles, there's a blog out there that says, it's titled, I wish I could ask the boss about the boss. And you know what it's going to have in there? It's going to have 12 questions you can ask that correlate to these 12 items that your manager needs to provide for you. And so you could ask those questions, all or the most important ones to you, in your next job interview to see how that manager responds. And they're great questions. I've had people give me lots of feedback to say this really changed the whole nature and the whole dynamic of my interview, and I was ruling in or out jobs based on these questions. That's what you have to do. You got to know what you're looking for, and then you got to find out if you're going to find those in a new organization, because you don't want to go from one bad manager to the next bad manager, or one bad organization to the next bad organization. And so those 12 questions, again, go to lovemondaylikeFriday.com. There's a blog called I Wish I Could Ask the Boss About the Boss. And again, find it there, find it on LinkedIn. It's out there a couple places. I think if you Googled, I wish I could ask the boss about the boss, it's going to take you to one of those locations with a blog written by me. So that's going to help you get into a better job next time. That's what I have for you today. These 12 items, your boss needs to provide them to you. And if he or she is not doing that, you got to do something, because you're not powerless. But if you just sit there and take it, you're choosing to be powerless, and I don't want you to do that, because I want you to love Monday just like Friday, but for a different reason, and you can do that. If you want more resources on this, go to lovemondaylikeFriday.com, sign up there. There are free resources. There are paid courses you could take. There are paid resources out there. Reach out to me. I'd love to help you in any way I can. Again, lovemondaylikeFriday.com. Subscribe to this podcast, please. I want this to be a movement, and I want it to get across the world. So share this with other people as well, and I will talk to you soon.